Every time Caitlin Clark steps into public view, something bigger than a sports appearance happens. It's not a coincidence anymore. It's a pattern. The latest proof arrived not on a hardwood, but on a manicured fairway under Florida sun, where Clark showed up for an LPGA Pro-Am and turned a quiet weekday at the course into a sold-out, cameras everywhere spectacle. Fans sprinted between holes just to keep up. Autograph seekers lined up as if they were outside a playoff arena. Broadcasters adjusted their schedules on the fly to show her first tee shot live. That's not routine for a Pro-Am. That's the Caitlin Clark effect migrating, loudly, from women's basketball to women's golf. If you watched her rookie year in the WNBA, you've seen how we got here. Even before the Indiana Fever called her name on draft night, ticket sales across the league surged. By some estimates, demand jumped nearly 90% compared to the previous season. People who had never circled a regular season WNBA date were suddenly buying 4 seats and a parking pass. Fever home games that used to feel like a local night out became something else entirely. Sold-out shows with kids wearing number 22 and holding up handmade signs with her name. When she finally put on the Fever uniform and got to work, she didn't flirt with the hype. She swallowed a whole. 19 points per game. Double figures almost every night. The first rookie to hit more than 100 three-pointers and record 300-plus assists in a single season. Those aren't good numbers. Those are career-launching numbers. But the statistics sheet doesn't fully explain the sensation. It felt different inside the arenas. Television cameras tracked her from warm-ups to final horn. School buses rolled up to road games. Entire sections were filled with families who drove hours because their kid had watched a highlight on social media and wanted to see it happen in real life. Caitlin Clark didn't just change the air inside WNBA buildings. She changed the audience. Suddenly, casual sports fans, people who might not have known the difference between a pick and roll and a dribble handoff, were streaming games on weeknights. The league had a star who pulled non-fans into the orbit, and not softly. She is the rare figure who turns curiosity into commitment in one evening. That's why the Pelican Golf Club looked the way it did when she arrived with a bag of clubs. The LPGA knew what to do with a star, so they didn't hesitate. They paired her with Nelly Korda, the world number 1, and let the moment breathe. Word spread. Ticket sales climbed. The gallery grew thick long before sunrise. Photographers lined the rope line. Golf Channel cut into its programming to cover Clark's first swing. It is hard to overstate how unusual that is for a women's Pro-Am. Then came a second unusual thing. Everyone, players, fans, sponsors, seemed to be smiling about it. Nelly Korda didn't look annoyed by the attention. She looked energized. After the round, she called Clark sweet, humble, and an unbelievable influence, and credited her for drawing a new crowd to the course. That's the part that stuck. This wasn't just a WNBA fan base peeking across the fence at golf. It was a living proof that star power can travel, that a crossover event can become a marketing win without taking an ounce away from the sport hosting it. LPGA officials recognized the moment for what it was. They capitalized with poise and speed. Live coverage, social clips, spotlight interviews, a respectful embrace from one superstar to another. The result? A Pro-Am that felt like a Sunday back nine at a major. If you listen closely, you could hear a second conversation rise as the cheers got louder. Some WNBA voices, officials, players, fans, weren't thrilled how quickly golf sees the spotlight. A few called it disloyal. Others used stronger words, accusing Clark of chasing publicity when she should be focused exclusively on the Fever. It's not universal opinion, and it's almost certainly not fair. But it's part of the story now because the size of the moment forced a new question into women's sports in real time. How do leagues share a crossover superstar without tugging her in different directions? You could feel the divide in the way people talked online. One side cheered a 22-year-old who carried women's basketball into prime time and then walked onto a golf course and did something similar in a single morning. The other side bristled at the idea that a rookie should become larger than the league so quickly that golf should get to piggyback on what the WNBA helped build. There's a dose of irony there. The fact remains, Caitlin Clark is elevating women's sports as a whole. Her presence lifts the LPGA and the WNBA and any other space she enters. Rather than splitting the audience, she expands it. What many people miss in the frenzy is that Clark's swing didn't come out of nowhere. Long before the fever, long before Iowa, she split time between the gym and the driving range. Childhood Saturdays might include an AAU tournament and a bucket of balls. Friends and family will tell you the game lodged itself early, and the habit never left. So when she walked the fairway at Pelican, it wasn't a publicity experiment. It looked like muscle memory. Zach Johnson, the major champion, has even mentioned public events where he crossed paths with her golf game years ago. You don't drain long putts under TV pressure by accident. You do that because competitive fire shows up in different clothes. That point matters because it counters a narrative that sprung up the moment the first tee shot sailed. Detractors call the appearance a stunt. It wasn't. It was a culmination. It also gave the rest of the sports world a lesson in how quickly momentum can be harnessed when an organization sees an opportunity and doesn't overcomplicate the response. The LPGA rolled out the red carpet without making a circus. They put Clark and Korda side by side and let the audience see two elite women in two different sports, sharing a stage without stepping on each other's shoes. Then they let the cameras do their work. If you work in sports marketing, you could freeze frame that day and turn it into a syllabus. The flip side of that compliment is harder to say aloud, but important. The WNBA hasn't always moved as quickly as it could have to center its biggest new star. In some corners, the league has treated the Caitlin Clark effect like a current to be balanced against other currents rather than a wave to be ridden. That cautious posture is understandable, even admirable in moderation. You don't build a healthy league by letting one athlete become the whole brand. At the same time, history shows that some athletes create such a surge that the right response is to lean in without fear. The NBA did it with Magic and Bird, then again with Jordan, then again with LeBron. Serena Williams didn't block other stories in tennis. She created space for them by making the sport inescapable. The LPGA's day with Clark felt like a textbook on bold, respectful embrace. The stakes extend beyond schedules and appearance fees. The Caitlin Clark effect isn't merely about sellouts and spike graphs. It's about who tells the story of women's sports to the next generation. Look at the crowd that followed her across a golf course. School-age kids with parents hustling to keep up. Teenagers who learned rules on the walk. Adults who didn't know they cared until they found themselves clapping for a great approach shot. If you're the LPGA or the WNBA, that's the moment you fight to own. Not to hog it, but to nurture it. There's also a deeper conversation about how women's sports are valued and promoted across the board. The LPGA has spent years building a polished product with world-class athletes, compelling rivalries, and dramas that sell themselves to anyone willing to watch. On Clark's day, they had the tactical instinct to plug her into that product without distorting it. The WNBA has done strong work this season with scheduling, better broadcast windows, and more content. But the speed of the Caitlin Clark story demanded an even bolder instinct to make her the face of a league that has never had a bigger opportunity. It's fair to say the WNBA is now at crossroads, not because one superstar will make or break a league, but because one superstar can accelerate a moment that would otherwise take a decade. Treat the moment with fear, and it drifts. Treat it with hunger, and it compounds. The LPGA showed what hunger looks like. Players embrace the crossover. Microphones amplify and respect rather than trying to measure who got the louder cheer. Executives cleared space. Cameras followed. It didn't hurt what golf is. It expanded who golf is for. If you're a fan of the Indiana Fever, there's a more immediate question. What does any of this mean for the team? The honest answer is it's more an opportunity than a threat. In basketball terms, Clark returns from her off-day swing to a roster that now plays in front of big crowds everywhere it goes. That means revenue, relevance, and responsibility. Cross-sport events don't need to steal off-season time. They can be carefully chosen, strategic touchpoints that keep the athlete visible while expanding both audiences. The fear isn't that Clark will pivot to golf. The fear is that without a coherent plan, someone else will decide what she does next. For those who still want to downplay the golf moment as a novelty, consider this. Clark drew bigger crowds in Pro-Am than some full LPGA events have seen for Sunday finishes. The Golf Channel followed a non-golfer's tee shots because millions of people who never tuned into a women's golf broadcast before wanted to watch this one. The comparison isn't meant to embarrass. It's meant to signal what is possible when a league and a star help each other rather than stand in each other's way. It's also worth pointing out, again, that this wasn't a betrayal by Clark. She didn't schedule a golf appearance on top of a playoff game. She used her platform during an appropriate window to elevate another women's sport. That's not abandoning basketball. That's demonstrating how large her influence already is. If anything, it proved a larger point. Women's sports are not a zero-sum game. They rise faster together than they do alone. Now take a step back and look at the past 8 months. Caitlin Clark declared for the WNBA draft and ticket sales spiked league-wide. She started playing, and Fever Road games became hot events in cities that had never sold out a regular season women's basketball game. She broke rookie records and headlined national broadcasts. When she walked onto a golf course, she drew a gallery that shook the sport out of its morning routine. She didn't steal oxygen. She created it. The inevitable backlash reveals another truth. Old instincts don't die easily. There are still people who react to women's sports breakthroughs by searching for a downside. They use words like distraction, loyalty, and focus as cudgels rather than questions. These are manageable headwinds and only if the institutions involved stop thinking in terms of turf and start thinking in terms of growth. The LPGA did. The WNBA still can. So what should the WNBA do? For starters, give Caitlin Clark the full weight of promotional resources without apology. Center marquee matchups featuring Clark, Aya Wilson, Sabrina Ionescu, Angel Reese, and the league's other breakout names in prime windows that match the demand. Create crossover content that welcomes fans who just discovered her through golf. Encourage the appearance at Pelican to become a case study in how to share audiences rather than silo them. If there's an athlete's unlimited rumor, sit down early and ask what freedom she needs to stay rooted in the league long term. The future doesn't have to be complicated. Clark can spend her winters and springs rewriting the WNBA record book, then scatter a few carefully chosen golf appearances into the off-season to grow her personal brand and, this part especially, bring more eyes back to the fever the moment she laces up again. Brands will line up to help weave those calendars together. Networks will pay to turn that weaving into programming. Fans will follow because they already have. If this sounds obvious, it's because it is. The temptation to make it about turf will always be there. It should be resisted. One thing the Pelican Golf Club morning showed clearly is that a star's gravity works best when the organizations in orbit decide to fly in formation. The WNBA can acknowledge the strength of Clark's pull without letting other stories disappear. The LPGA can take the win without pretending it's a one-off. And fans can stop being asked to pick a side when the smarter move is to buy tickets to both. The larger lesson? Women's sports aren't waiting for permission anymore. They are writing their own headlines and placing their own cameras. Caitlin Clark is not the first superstar to crossover. She's the first of a new kind, one who pulls mainstream audiences across platforms because she's equal parts relatable and ruthless, disciplined and joyful, prepared and fearless. That's why a morning at a golf course felt like a night in a basketball arena. If you care about women's basketball, women's golf, or women's sports in general, the takeaway is simple. This is what growth looks like up close. It isn't tidy or unanimous. It comes with noise, criticism, and a learning curve, but it is unmistakable. Caitlin Clark has already reshaped the WNBA conversation. Now she's giving the LPGA a jolt most leagues would kill for. The question isn't whether she can do both. It's whether the institutions around her will choose to meet the moment. What happens next will say a lot about how quickly women's sports can scale from here. If the WNBA leans in, Caitlin Clark could become the bridge that brings a generation of golf fans into basketball arenas next summer. If the LPGA keeps embracing crossovers with grace, it could lock in an audience that never would have shown up at pro tournament otherwise. That's a win for both, not a tug of war.